The stars had always been cold and silent, until one day a desperate signal broke through the emptiness of space. A ship from the Xelari Republic, a peaceful alliance of many alien species, arrived in the Sol system. Their ship was battered, leaking energy from the damage it had taken while fleeing the Cathar Dominion, a brutal and merciless empire that had been sweeping across the galaxy. The Xelari had never thought they would need human help. They had always seen humans as reckless, dangerous creatures from a violent world, something to be avoided at all costs. But now, they had no choice. The Xelari ambassador, a tall, slender alien with skin like smooth silver, addressed the humans. "We come in peace," she said, her voice echoing in the hall of the United Terran Federation's Central Command. But there was no peace in her eyes, only fear. "Our worlds are burning. The Cathar Dominion is unstoppable. We've asked the Galactic Council for help, but they refused. They said the Cathar are too powerful, too dangerous." The room was silent as the humans exchanged glances. The Xelari continued, almost pleading. "We need your help. Your warriors." The humans had been quiet throughout, their arms crossed in expressions unreadable. The Xelari knew that humans had a reputation in the galaxy. They were known as Deathworlders, the species that had survived on a harsh, unforgiving planet called Earth. Other species in the galaxy considered humans to be too wild, too unpredictable. But now, the Xelari were desperate. They had lost entire colonies to the Cathar, and there was no one else to turn to. One of the Terran generals, a broad-shouldered man with a deep voice, spoke first. His name was General Marcus Steele, and his reputation was as large as his frame. "You should have come sooner," he said, his voice cold. "We don't do charity. If we help on our terms." The Xelari ambassador lowered her gaze, knowing she had little room to bargain. "We know. We just want to survive. We will give whatever we can, whatever we have left." The general leaned back in his chair, considering the words carefully. Around him, Terran soldiers stood at attention, their faces grim. The humans didn't hesitate to fight, not when they had something to protect. But what would they fight for this time? A peaceful civilization on the edge of extinction. "I don't care about your terms," General Steele finally said, his voice sharp. "We don't negotiate. We fight, and we win." The Xelari ambassador nodded, her expression a mix of relief and fear. She wasn't sure what to expect from the humans, but she had no other choice now. The Cathar were coming for them all. And the humans, for better or worse, were their last hope. The room was tense, the silence almost unbearable as General Steele's words echoed in the minds of everyone present. The Xelari had begged for help, and the Terrans had agreed, but only on their own terms. The Xelari ambassador, though relieved, was unsure of what to expect next. She had seen many species in her time, but none like humans. Back on Earth, humanity was preparing for war. General Steele had given the order, and the massive Terran war machines began to move. Ships, soldiers, and weapons of unimaginable power were mobilizing, ready to strike at the heart of the Cathar Dominion. The Xelari had no idea what they were about to witness. They had always viewed humans as unpredictable, sometimes even dangerous. But now, as they watched the human war machines slowly come to life, they could see the truth. Humanity didn't hesitate. They were organized, efficient, and determined. The humans had been through wars before, terrible wars that had scared their history. But they had always survived, and they always came back stronger. Terran warships, armed with the latest technology, sailed through space at breakneck speeds, heading straight for the Cathar's territory. These ships were built for destruction. The Xelari, with their peaceful ways, had never seen anything like it. Their ships were sleek, designed for speed and diplomacy, but the Terran ships were enormous, armed to the teeth, and bristling with weapons that could tear apart a planet. But it wasn't just the ships that amazed the Xelari. It was the soldiers. The Terran Marines were unlike anything they had ever seen. They weren't just soldiers, they were survivors, trained to fight on the most dangerous, hostile world in the galaxy, Earth, a planet filled with deadly creatures, harsh weather, and environments that could kill a person in minutes. The humans had adapted to it. They had survived. And now, they were ready to fight for something else, for the Xilari. The Xilari ambassador had seen many species in her time, but she had never seen warriors like these. Terran soldiers were sharp-eyed, grim-faced, and seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 battles on their shoulders. They didn't speak much, but when they did, it was always with purpose. "I don't care if we have to burn the stars," one Terran captain had said when asked about their strategy. "We will win. That's all that matters." The Xilari couldn't understand how a species could be so confident, so determined to fight against a force as powerful as the Cathar Dominion. They had always relied on diplomacy, on careful negotiations. But the humans, they didn't negotiate. They didn't waste time talking. They just fought. As the Terran fleet left the Sol system, the Xilari watched in awe and fear. They had never been so close to a species that didn't fear death. To them, it was a strange and terrifying thing, this human bravery, this willingness to face certain destruction with a defiant smile. The Xilari had no idea what they had just set in motion, but they knew one thing for sure. The galaxy would never be the same again. The human war machine was unstoppable. General Steele sat at the head of the massive command table, surrounded by Terran officers. His eyes were locked on the holographic map of the galaxy, where the Cathar Dominion's forces were closing in on the Xilari Republic's outer colonies. The stakes were high. The Xilari were counting on them. "This isn't just about defending their colonies," General Steele said, his voice steady, filled with purpose. "This is about sending a message. We don't let monsters like the Cathar tear through the galaxy without consequences." The officers around him nodded. They understood. Humanity had faced its own dark history, wars that had threatened to tear their world apart. But they had emerged stronger, tougher, and with a fierce resolve that few could match. And now, they would show the galaxy exactly what they were made of. The Terran fleet, an immense force of warships and fighters, had already set course for the Cathar's home territory. But it wasn't just about the ships. The humans were sending something far more terrifying: their elite shock troopers. These soldiers were the heart of humanity's military strength. They had trained for years, surviving on the harshest worlds, facing the deadliest environments, and battling the fiercest creatures that Earth had to offer. The Cathar had never faced anything like them. The shock troopers were preparing for their mission now. On a barren moon, far from the eyes of the Xilari, the soldiers were gearing up. Their heavy armor glinted under the cold light of distant stars. They checked their weapons one final time: pulse rifles, grenades, energy blades, and readied themselves for what was about to come. Their mission: infiltrate a Cathar fortress deep inside enemy territory, disable their weapon systems, and sabotage key infrastructure to cripple the Dominion's war effort. Sergeant Emily Briggs, a seasoned veteran, stood at the front of the line, leading her squad. She had seen countless battles in her time, but this one was different. This was personal. The Cathar were not just invaders. They were monsters who destroyed everything in their path. And they would pay for that. "We hit fast, hit hard, and don't leave any survivors," Sergeant Briggs said, her voice low but full of intensity. "We fight like we've never fought before. We'll show them that no one threatens our allies." Her squad, a diverse mix of humans from different walks of life, stood ready. There was Private Jason Lee, the rookie with a fire in his eyes; Corporal Maria Ortega, the sniper with a steady hand; and Specialist Tyrone Jackson, the tech expert who could hack into any system. Together, they were a team forged in the fires of humanity's toughest trials. The soldiers didn't speak much. They didn't need to. They were Deathworlders, and their reputation was already known across the galaxy. The Cathar would soon understand that the humans were not to be underestimated. The shock troopers were ready. As the Terran fleet prepared to jump into Cathar space, General Steele turned to his officers. Let's show them what happens when you push humanity too far. The Terran fleet jumped into Cathar space with an unrelenting force, their warships cutting through the stars like a predator closing in on its prey. General Steele's orders were clear. Strike first, strike hard, and leave nothing but chaos in their wake. The Cathar Dominion was arrogant. They had ruled the galaxy for centuries, crushing anyone who dared challenge their power. The Cathar had always seen themselves as invincible. They didn't fear anyone. But when the first Terran ships dropped out of hyperspace and into the heart of Cathar-controlled space, everything changed. The Cathar fleets were huge, larger than anything humanity had ever faced. Their ships were built for intimidation, massive warships that seemed to block out the stars. But what the Cathar didn't know was that they had underestimated humanity's strength. The first battle started with a flash of energy. The Cathar spotted the Terran ships as they emerged from hyperspace and immediately opened fire, their weapons charging with deadly force. But the Terrans were ready. Evasive maneuvers. General Steele barked into the comms, and the human fleet scattered in every direction, dodging the Cathar's heavy fire with impossible agility. The Cathar had never seen a fleet move like this. The Terran ships were faster, smaller, and far more unpredictable than they had anticipated. "We've got them on the run," said Lieutenant Sarah Turner, the fleet's tactical officer. She had been with General Steele through many battles, but this one felt different. There was something more intense about the way the humans fought. It was almost as if they had a purpose, a burning need to show their strength. But the real shock came when the Terran shock troopers hit the ground. The Cathar had set up a defensive position on the barren planet below, a strategic fortress that protected one of their key supply routes. It was heavily guarded, surrounded by walls, watchtowers, and weapon emplacements. But it wasn't enough to stop the humans. Sergeant Emily Briggs and her squad dropped from the sky in their drop pods, crashing through the atmosphere like meteors. They hit the ground with a deafening roar, the shockwave sending Cathar soldiers scattering in every direction. The humans didn't even wait to catch their breath. "Move, move, move," Sergeant Briggs shouted as she led her squad toward the nearest defensive tower. Her pulse rifle was already raised, and her team followed with brutal efficiency. Private Lee and Corporal Ortega took up positions to cover their advance, while Specialist Jackson hacked into the fortress's security system. The Cathar were quick to respond, but they were no match for the Terran shock troopers. The humans fought with a fury that was hard to describe. Every shot was precise, every move calculated. They weren't just soldiers. They were predators, using everything in their environment to their advantage. The Cathar tried to regroup, but the humans had already broken their lines. "We're in," Sergeant Briggs said as she detonated a charge, blowing open the gates of the fortress. "Now let's finish this." The Cathar were shocked. They had never seen soldiers like this. Humans didn't care about the odds. They didn't fear death. They just kept fighting, pushing forward until there was nothing left but victory. The Cathar Dominion had underestimated the humans, and now they were paying the price. The initial shock of the Terran fleet's arrival was only the beginning. The Cathar had always prided themselves on their ruthless nature, their ability to conquer and destroy entire civilizations. But the Deathworlders were different. They didn't just fight. They survived. And they fought like there was no tomorrow. As the battle raged across Cathar space, whispers spread like wildfire through the enemy ranks. Stories of the Terran shock troopers and their brutal efficiency reached even the highest levels of Cathar leadership. The shock of seeing humans fight was only the beginning. What truly terrified the Cathar was how the humans did not stop. No matter the odds, no matter the pain, they kept going. They never stopped fighting. One Cathar officer muttered to his superior, watching a group of Terran soldiers push through their defenses. "They fight like they're already dead. The Cathar had thought they were the deadliest species in the galaxy, but the humans had shattered that illusion. Every Terran soldier was a living weapon, capable of surviving the most hostile environments in the galaxy, because Earth, their homeworld, was a death world, filled with creatures, plants, and weather that could kill a person in seconds. The humans had survived it all. They were the ultimate survivors, and the galaxy had never seen anything like it. Sergeant Emily Briggs, leading her squad deep into Cathar-held territory, could feel the weight of her reputation. She had lost friends and comrades in the fight, but that didn't matter. She had a job to do, and she would see it through to the end. The Cathar had expected the humans to break under pressure. They had expected their massive war machines, their overwhelming numbers, and their brutal tactics to crush the Terrans. Instead, they were witnessing something terrifying: humanity's ability to adapt, to learn from every battle, and to come back stronger with every fight. On the ground, Specialist Tyrone Jackson hacked into the Cathar's communications network, disrupting their signals and turning their own systems against them. Corporal Maria Ortega, perched high in a sniper nest, picked off Cathar commanders with unerring accuracy, her rifle making barely a sound. Private Jason Lee, despite being a rookie, moved like a seasoned warrior, his pulse rifle tearing through enemy lines. They didn't need orders. They were in sync, driven by a force that only Deathworlders could understand. The Cathar commanders, once confident in their superiority, now looked over their shoulders with growing unease. The humans had turned their entire fortress into a killing ground. Every corner, every hallway, was a trap. Every Terran soldier seemed to know exactly where to strike. The Cathar had underestimated the humans, and now they were paying the price. But it wasn't just the soldiers on the ground who were feeling the pressure. The Cathar fleet, once proud and invincible, was starting to buckle. The Terran warships were faster, more agile, and equipped with weapons the Cathar had never seen before. The humans were no longer the reckless newcomers they had once dismissed. They were a threat that was growing by the day. As General Steele looked out at the battlefield from his flagship, he couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. The humans had always been underestimated, but now they were proving their unmatched strength. The galaxy would soon know one undeniable truth. When it came to survival, the Deathworlders were the ones who would always come out on top. The Terran forces had made their mark. The Cathar Dominion, once proud and powerful, was now on the defensive. General Steele watched from his command ship as reports flooded in from the front lines. The human forces were tearing through the Cathar defenses faster than anyone had expected. Each battle was a brutal reminder of what the Terrans were capable of. "We've pushed them back, but this isn't over," Steele said, his eyes focused on the holographic display in front of him. The Cathar weren't backing down, but their arrogance had been shattered. They were losing, and they knew it. On the surface of the Cathar-held planet, Sergeant Briggs and her squad had reached their next objective, a Cathar command center buried deep within the planet's mountains. The Cathar had made a serious mistake, underestimating the humans once again. Briggs had seen this before, alien species thinking that their fortresses were unbreakable. They were wrong. "Move out, and stay sharp," Sergeant Briggs ordered. "The Cathar don't surrender, so we give them no choice." The squad moved quickly through the rocky terrain, their armored forms barely making a sound. As they neared the command center, Specialist Jackson hacked into the Cathar's security systems, unlocking the entrance with ease. The doors slid open, and the team stormed in. The Cathar inside had no time to react. The humans were everywhere, moving like shadows, striking with deadly precision. Pulse rifles fired. Energy blades flashed, and Cathar soldiers fell one by one. It was chaos, but it was controlled chaos. The Terrans didn't waste time or ammunition. Every shot counted. Every movement was calculated. "We've got a heavy resistance ahead," Corporal Ortega reported from her sniper position, her voice calm despite the chaos unfolding around her. "But they won't last long." The Cathar were relentless. but they were disorganized. The Terrans had broken their lines, and now they were simply mopping up the remaining forces. It wasn't long before Briggs and her squad reached the heart of the command center, where the Cathar leadership had been hiding. The Cathar commanders, once proud and defiant, were now shaking with fear. They had never faced an enemy like this. Humans didn't fight with the same tactics, the same honor, or the same respect for tradition. The Terrans didn't care about the rules of war. They fought to win, and they didn't stop until the battle was over. "You can't win," one Cathar commander hissed as Briggs and her team surrounded him. "The Dominion will crush you." Briggs didn't respond. She simply leveled her rifle at the Cathar's head. "This is the end of your Dominion," she said, "and the beginning of your fall." The Cathar commander didn't even have time to react before Briggs pulled the trigger. He fell to the ground, his body hitting the cold floor with a sickening thud. The rest of the Cathar soldiers quickly realized they were outmatched. They had no hope of victory. The Cathar were beginning to fall, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. The Terran war machine was unstoppable. They had faced their worst enemies and won. And now, they were sending a message to the rest of the galaxy. No one would stand in the way of humanity's survival. The tide of the war was turning. The Cathar Dominion, once a terrifying force in the galaxy, was now in full retreat. The Terran fleet had pushed deep into their territory, leaving a trail of destruction that the Cathar could not ignore. Their pride had been shattered, and their military was beginning to crumble under the pressure of humanity's relentless assault. General Steele stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the reports flood in. The Cathar's homeworld, their last stronghold, was now within reach. The Terran fleet had destroyed the last of their outer defenses, and the Cathar were on the back foot. It was only a matter of time before the final blow was struck. "We've broken through their outer defense lines," Lieutenant Turner said, her voice steady as she studied the data on her console. "They're pulling back to the capital. It's a clear shot." Steele nodded, his face grim. "This is it. We take their capital, and it's over." On the ground, Sergeant Briggs and her squad had completed their mission. The Cathar command center had fallen, and the remaining Cathar forces were scattered, demoralized, and leaderless. But Briggs knew this was just the beginning. The real battle would be fought on the Cathar homeworld. "Ready for the final push, Sergeant?" Private Lee asked, his voice tight with anticipation. The rookie had proven himself time and time again, but this would be the real test. Briggs gave a sharp nod. "This isn't over until the Cathar are wiped out. Stay focused." The squad was preparing to board their transport, the last leg of their mission taking them to the heart of the Cathar capital. It was heavily fortified, but Briggs had no doubt that the humans could break through. They had done it before. And this time, there would be no stopping them. The Terran fleet entered Cathar space, its massive ships bristling with weapons and ready for the final battle. The Cathar homeworld loomed ahead, a planet of towering cities and vast fortifications. It was a world built for war. But the humans had one advantage that the Cathar could never understand: the will to survive. As the human ships descended into the atmosphere, Cathar defenses lit up, firing everything they had in an attempt to stop the invasion. But the Terran fleet didn't flinch. They moved through the enemy fire with deadly precision, tearing through the defenses and pushing deeper into the heart of Cathar territory. On the surface, Briggs and her squad landed in the capital, the roar of their drop pods shaking the ground beneath them. The Cathar forces were waiting, their weapons raised, ready to defend their world with everything they had. But the humans were unstoppable. "We push forward," Briggs shouted. "No retreat, no surrender." The squad surged forward, guns blazing. The Cathar fought back with everything they had left, but it was clear that they were no match for the humans. The Terrans moved through the city like a storm, leaving destruction in their wake. The Cathar had no choice but to fall back. As Briggs and her squad pushed deeper into the heart of the city, they could see the fear in the eyes of the Cathar soldiers. The mighty Dominion was on the brink of collapse. The humans had shown them the true meaning of survival. The Cathar had never known a species like this, and now they were about to learn just how far the Deathworlders would go to protect what they had fought for. The Cathar homeworld was in chaos. What was once a proud and fearsome empire was now crumbling beneath the weight of the Terran assault. General Steele watched the battle unfold from the bridge of his flagship, every report of victory for humanity. The Terran fleet had broken through the Cathar's final defense lines, and now the last stronghold of the Cathar Dominion was in sight. It was a race to the heart of the enemy capital, and Steele knew that this would be the final battle. Commander Briggs and her squad are already on the ground, Lieutenant Turner reported. They're making their way to the palace. The Cathar are retreating, but they're setting up a final defense. Steele's eyes narrowed as he studied the holographic map of the capital. The Cathar were cornered, but they still had one last card to play. Their king, a ruthless and cunning leader who would stop at nothing to protect his empire. Prepare the ground forces, Steele ordered. We finish this today. Sergeant Briggs and her squad moved quickly through the streets of the Cathar capital. The city was a fortress, its towering structures built to withstand the fiercest of attacks. But the Cathar hadn't counted on humanity's ability to adapt. The Terrans had learned from every battle, each one making them stronger and more efficient. Push forward, Briggs shouted as they neared the palace gates. No matter what, we break through. The Cathar had set up heavy defenses around the palace, but Briggs and her squad were ready. With a series of well-coordinated strikes, they blasted through the gates and forced their way inside. The Cathar soldiers fought fiercely, but their hearts were no longer in the fight. They had seen what humanity was capable of, and it was clear that the Terrans weren't stopping until the Cathar were finished. Private Lee's pulse rifle roared as he picked off Cathar soldiers trying to flank them. Corporal Ortega, perched high above, used her sniper rifle to take out enemy commanders with pinpoint accuracy. Specialist Jackson hacked into the palace's security systems, disabling cameras and locking doors behind them, making it impossible for the Cathar to regroup. The closer they got to the palace's inner sanctum, the more desperate the Cathar became. But it was too late. The humans had already broken their defenses. When they finally reached the throne room, they were met by the Cathar king himself. He stood tall, his armor gleaming, his eyes filled with fury. He had ruled with an iron fist, but now he was the last obstacle standing between the humans and complete victory. You may have broken my empire, Terrans, the Cathar king growled, but you will never break me. Sergeant Briggs stepped forward, her rifle aimed directly at the king. You had your chance, she said coldly. Now it's over. Without hesitation, she fired. The shot rang out, and the Cathar king fell to the ground. The throne room fell silent. The Terrans had done it. They had brought down the Cathar Dominion, and the galaxy would never forget the price the Cathar paid for underestimating humanity. With the king's fall, the rest of the Cathar forces crumbled. The humans had proven their unmatched strength, and the Cathar were left to pick up the pieces of their broken empire. Sergeant Briggs and her squad stood tall in the throne room, knowing they had changed the course of history. The Terrans had not just survived, they had conquered, and they had sent a message to the entire galaxy. Humanity would never be defeated. The Cathar Dominion had fallen. The Terran fleet hovered above the ruins of the once great empire, its ships a testament to humanity's power and resolve. The battle was over, but the war was far from done. General Steele stood at the helm of his flagship, gazing at the smoking wreckage of the Cathar homeworld. It had been a long and bloody fight, but the Terrans had emerged victorious. They're done, Lieutenant Turner said, looking at the scans of the capital below. The Cathar have lost everything. Their king is dead, their fleets scattered. It's over. Steele nodded. We've done what we came here to do. The Cathar will no longer be a threat to anyone. But the victory felt bittersweet. The cost had been high. So many lives had been lost, both on the Terran side and the Cathar. But Steele knew that this was the price of survival. In a galaxy where strength meant everything, humanity had proven that they would never back down. On the surface of the Cathar homeworld, Sergeant Briggs and her squad stood among the wreckage of the palace. The city had fallen, and the last remnants of the Cathar forces were scattered. It had been a hard fight, but Briggs couldn't shake the feeling that the Terrans had just entered a new chapter in their history. "We did it," Private Lee said, his voice filled with disbelief. "It's over. We actually did it." Briggs looked around at the fallen Cathar soldiers, their weapons lying useless on the ground. The once mighty Cathar dominion had been reduced to nothing more than ashes. But despite the victory, there was no celebration, no cheers. This was a war of survival, not conquest. The humans had fought not for glory, but for their very existence. "We did what we had to do," Briggs said quietly. "But remember, this is just the beginning. There are more out there, more who will test us, more who will try to destroy us." Her words were a reminder of the reality that lay ahead. The Terrans had faced the Cathar and won, but the galaxy was vast, and there were countless other enemies lurking in the dark corners of space. Humanity had proven itself, but there was still much to be done. As the Terran fleet began its journey back home, the people of Earth watched from their screens, knowing that their species had changed forever. The Cathar had been just the first test. The universe was filled with dangers, and humanity would face them head-on. They had survived the harshest environments, fought the deadliest of enemies, and emerged victorious. The Terran people had proven that they were a force to be reckoned with, and in the eyes of the galaxy, humanity's reputation was now set in stone. No one would ever dare underestimate the Deathworlders again. General Steele stood tall as the fleet left Cathar space. The battle had been won, but the war for humanity's future was just beginning. There were more challenges ahead, but Steele knew that the Terrans would face them, as they always had, with unmatched valor, unbreakable strength, and the will to survive. The galaxy had learned one undeniable truth: humanity was not to be trifled with.